get a kick out of it. So
Definitely. Speaking of on the air.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the Unready room. I forget the name of the show momentarily. I'm Dan Gunther. With me is Brandi, Jackola. And yeah. How's it going today?
Yeah, it's yeah. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's been a weird day. We'll just go with that. It's fine.
Same here. I don't know what's going on, but it's been a really strange day here as well. And there's some more recent strangeness compounded by what's happening in the chat. So why don't you speak to that? Because that's really funny. Yeah,
we were having a conversation beforehand because, my nickname today is She Who Is Dave's Wife, and you called me Mrs. Dave, and I said no, it's more likely that Dave would be called Mr. Brandi, and then Wellington Smith says, we were not on the air yet, and I just started laughing so hard when I saw that comment. Great minds.
That is so weird. No. Some things get into the ether, as Commander Willa said or Lieutenant Willa said last season on Discovery. That's weird.
Yep.
But
crazy. Super crazy.
Bruce and I recorded Positively Trek this morning, episode 112, and something similar happened where like Bruce said something and I had just thought the same thing like 5 seconds earlier, and I can't remember what that was, but there's something going on today. Something's weird today. The edges of the simulation are showing, I think.
Yeah, well, the thing is that stuff like this usually happens between Dave and me because it's like we're sharing a mind a lot of the time. And usually at the time, we're just like, was that your thought and I said it out loud, or was it my thought and you were just, usually it's like, I don't know which one of us came up with that, but one of us said it, we're good.
That's funny. Yeah, the same thing happens between Nikki and I a lot too. Me and grammatically correct a lot. Which
it would actually be. Well, yeah, it's that's the thing. Is it me or is it I? Because it's not between you and me, between Nikki and me. So it would be
me. Yeah. I corrected myself. I caught myself. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I'm just letting everybody else know why you were correct. So.
Absolutely.
Grammar 101.
Exactly. Well, speaking of people who speak very properly and with good grammar and always usually very composed, let's talk about some Vulcans and the TNG episode Sarek, which I gotta say, I'm really happy folks chose this one this last week because I haven't seen it in a while.
Same.
And it was really fun to revisit it today. I rewatched it today, thanks to the fine folks over at Netflix. So,
yeah, it is not what I would call a fun episode for me because, I have seen people in not necessarily related to me, but people who are, parents of people that I know that are in the same kind of decline, and it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And so this was just a lot more real than it was all the other times that I watched it. And so it gut punched me a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot in this episode that, of course, mirrors and equates to things like that in real life, and there's a lot there to talk about. I think
yes, absolutely,
we're going to get there for sure. So yeah, and some other things I noticed watching this with kind of, I guess, a more mature eye, is to put it kindly, nowadays than the last time I saw it. So yeah, really interesting experience watching it this time around. So yeah, first of all, I guess the one thing we should talk about to start with is the whole kind of directive to the TNG writers and staff that we don't really touch TOS stuff in the Next Generation, right? With the exception of that second episode that was basically a redo of the Naked Time. Other than that, leave it alone, right? Don't. And then this was kind of really the first big one, I would say, that really connected back to the original series. Certainly the first guest star, other than McCoy in the very first episode, that kind of linked back to TOS.
Yes. And Michael Piller, who had been on the show, I think, for about a year at this point, he said in an interview, or was it for a quote for a book? I can't remember now, that he had known Gene for less than a year at this point. Gene Roddenberry, of course. If you don't know who Gene is, when I say Gene and Star Trek in the same sentence, come on. And he said, he used to be this man who was really vital and just full of life and always going, and so present. And he was starting to go into this kind of decline. And so it was echoing what was happening to Gene, and it was just really hard to see for Michael Piller, because he didn't get that time with Gene that everybody had before that. So he only had less than a year before Gene started kind of moving away from being a part of the series, because he just wasn't there enough mentally or physically to be able to continue. So that makes me sad.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a little brutal for sure, and definitely I think some of that is echoed in this episode, like you say, and the reverence that the character is treated with is something that I really noticed as well. The whole introduction, the Riker and Picard talking about meeting a man who helped form the Federation and make it what it is today. I really got that sense. And you talking about Gene Roddenberry, I hadn't really put it together in my head, but there's a lot of parallels there between that and the kind of reverence that the people working on that show probably would have had for Gene Roddenberry, multiplied even more so by the reverence that a lot of people have today about Gene Roddenberry now that he's been gone for quite a long time. He's kind of been held up as this kind of almost mythic force in Star Trek. And I mean, he did create Star Trek. He's a very important part of the entire universe. And that's funny, that parallel, I hadn't made that at the time, but now that you say that, I'm like, oh man, like a lot of that could be said about Gene Roddenberry as well.
Well, and it is interesting to note that they were thinking about this story very early on in the series. And Gene did not want it to be Sarek. Other people wanted it to be Sarek. Gene didn't want it to be Sarek. And so he said, okay, do one with it being Sarek and do one with just another Vulcan. Write two scripts. And so that's what they did, but they didn't actually produce either one of them at the time. And then when we got to this point in season 3, he's like, okay, go ahead and do Sarek. He gave them the go ahead, the green light. Again, just like wrenches my heart, you guys.
Yeah, for sure. And the amazing acting chops of both Mark Leonard and Patrick Stewart in this episode, like bringing them together, it just blows my mind. And the way I watched Star Trek back in the day, I kind of started watching The Next Generation first run in season 5. So I had actually seen Unification 1 and 2 before I got this Next Generation introduction to Sarek. So it was nice. I can't remember exactly. It was all so long ago. I don't really remember watching Sarek for the first time, but I had watched it knowing where his story was going in Unification, and that added another kind of level to it, that, this isn't just a one-off thing they're bringing in for this episode, and then we never see the character again. This is a legacy Star Trek character, and we're going to catch up with him again and see the ultimate outcome of all of this, which is also really heart-wrenching for sure.
It is. I have always loved Mark Leonard. And of course I started with the original series because I'm old. So I just remembered him as Sarek. So when he showed up on Buck Rogers, I was really confused as a child. But then I understood later, oh, it's an actor. I got it now. But yeah, I was really surprised that he was going to be on TNG. And I knew it wasn't just stunt casting. So I thought, this is going to be something. This is
That's
really
cool.
going to be something. And I was not disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, I had actually watched all of the original series, so I was familiar with Sarek and stuff. It was kind of one of those things where I watched the original series on reruns all the time as a kid. And then,
Yeah.
my dad told me one day about this other show that's on right now called The Next Generation. And I was like, what? What's this? And I had to check it out. And that just happened to be what it was. But so yeah, there was that familiarity with the character, but I hadn't seen this episode till later, which definitely plays with how I encountered the episodes, I guess. But yeah. I do remember as a kid being very confused about the Amanda Perrin thing, just kind of not thinking of the timescales in my head, and being like when I saw Unification, being like, how is Amanda still alive? Like, she can't be. That's weird. And then not realizing, oh, this is a different person. Whoops. So I was young.
Yeah, well, Sarek has a thing for human women,
Yeah, and I've been noticing some chat in the some comments here in the chat about Sarek's predilection for human women. So let's talk about Perrin. What do we think of this character? And I don't necessarily like to compare people, I guess, but is she a worthy successor to Amanda? Blah blah blah. I don't know. What do you think of their relationship here?
You cannot call her a successor to Amanda because the relationships are completely different. Perrin is a completely different person. And I think, honestly, my personal opinion as to why Sarek chose another human female is, I think, honestly, he craves that emotion. He craves the strength of a human woman. He craves that, it's that's je ne sais quoi. I can't name it. He got used to that and craved it from Amanda. And then when he lost Amanda, he needed that again. And it wasn't like he was looking for a replacement, obviously. He was more logical than that. But he also knew that he was now set in his ways, so to speak, and he was going to need a human companion. And that's personally what I think. There's really no canon there, but that's my personal headcanon.
It makes sense. And I definitely, and again, you're right. I was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying compare the two. That's not a good idea. I do see echoes of the same type of relationship, which I actually really appreciated. Like, there's the one moment, and it's totally in line with the way Sarek interacted with Amanda when he says the line, "My wife can be logical when she chooses to be," or something like that.
Oh yes.
And I'm like, oh boy, same old Sarek.
Yeah,
that was definitely a through line.
Well, it takes a special kind of human to love a Vulcan. And not just to love a Vulcan. I mean, there have been a few human women who have thought that they have loved Vulcans, but then couldn't really take having a relationship with them. But, obviously Amanda was special, and obviously Perrin is special. So we don't get to know that much about her, but what I got from her, I felt that she was someone to be respected, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the poise with which she acts. And it's almost Vulcan. And I mean, that's very much on purpose. Like, she is very composed, and when she speaks with Picard, there's emotion there, but it's reserved. Like this, I would have loved to have seen her prep for that role. Like, what was the kind of backstory she built in her mind if she did that? And like, because she really seems like a human woman who has lived on Vulcan among Vulcans for a long time. And I love that, the limited amount of time we get with her, she manages to communicate that very well.
Yes, she says in that when Picard confronts her about Sarek's condition, and she says, "I know a lot about the Vulcan mind and a lot about the heart." And so she obviously has spent a lot of time with Vulcans, duh. But which makes me wonder, had she spent time on Vulcan and that is how she met Sarek, or when did they meet? Did he really rob the cradle here? I just don't know. And I don't want to think about that too hard.
It did kind of occur to me that, like, we're used to some relationships with a big age gap, but this is over a century. Like, if you really think about it.
If you want to compare it in years, yes, but if you want to compare it in stages of life, not as big of a gap, really. So
absolutely, yeah. On paper, it's like burr, but yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. One last thing about Perrin, and just a line that I wanted to highlight, kind of when, like, fitting in with what you said about her knowing the Vulcan mind and the Vulcan heart. I love at the end when Picard says to her, "He loves you," and she's like, "Yeah, I know." Like, she doesn't say it. She doesn't say it like that, but she's like, "Yeah, duh. I know. It's okay."
Yeah, there is only one weird thing, and that's when they're having that conversation where Picard is confronting her, and she talks about Bandai syndrome and how it's more of an old folk tale, etc. And then she's getting more and more agitated, and she then calls it Bandy syndrome. And I'm like, wait, what? And I listened to it again to make sure that I heard what I heard, and I thought, okay, why didn't they do another take for that one?
Yeah, that feels to me like it was quite a bit after they'd filmed it and they just hadn't caught that, and they're doing the edit and going, "Oh crap." Like, there's no other take for them to use. That's frustrating. And it's funny if you take it on face value, and then a few moments later Sarek walks in, almost like he heard the whole thing, and the way he pronounces it, it's like he emphasizes the correct. "You are discussing my supposed fight with Bandai syndrome." It's just like he says it like, it's like, whoa, dang. A little side eye there, but no.
Yeah, because I mean, she says it right the first time, and that's what I don't understand is, okay, I would understand if it was wrong the first time, but she said it right the first time and then wrong the second time, and really Patrick Stewart didn't catch that either. This is just kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean,
one of those head scratchers.
There might have even been another take where they did it correctly, but something else ruined the take and they couldn't use it or something. So I have a friend who does video editing, and the frustrations that he has when he's coming to footage like 2 weeks after it's been filmed and he realizes there's something wrong with one key part, or they didn't get one thing, and he's just like, "Oh no." So
the boom was in the shot.
Oh yeah, I sympathize with them on that. I'm sure there's something that, like, they just could not fix that, which is unfortunate for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of a good point. David says Patty Stew is used to live theater, no edits. Can't fix it in post.
That is true, but at the same time, he's been on this show for almost 3 years now, so he's gotten used to production, and it's not like he had never done movies before either. So
yeah,
but he'd been on both sides of that fence. But even so, but you're probably right. It was probably one of those situations where, like, oh crap, we can't use the take where this is right. What are you gonna do?
Wellington brings up a good comment here. I wonder how closely Sonequa studied this episode. Michael Burnham and her story was going through my head a lot during this episode as well. And if you've had a chance to read the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard by David A. Goodman, by Jean-Luc Picard, but edited by David A. Goodman.
Right, of course.
when he talks about this, the experience of Picard mind melding with Sarek, there's one line that's just kind of put in there where he's talking about the images he got from Sarek's mind. A young Spock, blah, blah, blah. A young girl tragically ripped from her parents in the midst of fire and flames, and then moving on to something else. And you're like, oh, that was Michael Burnham. So that's kind of cool. I mean, obviously, Discovery was written years and years later. There's no whatever, but I like that he worked that in, and Picard knows about Michael Burnham somehow now. It's kind of cool.
Fascinating.
But anyway, none of that is, of course, in this episode, but just a fun little side note.
Hey, we're lucky we even got a mention of Spock, because that was like,
oh yeah,
a really big deal. Really big deal.
So, speaking of Spock, the throwaway line that I love is when Picard says he met Sarek once at his son's wedding, which I love that line because, and I haven't read the novels, but I know that they take that line and run with it in the novels and actually have Spock's wedding at some point happen.
Sarek has more than one son.
That's true, but they went with Spock in the novels. But yeah. Speaking of other sons, I note that Sarek didn't mention Sybok.
Interesting.
Indeed.
Yes.
Anyway, okay. So, Vulcan's Heart, I think, is the novel that features Spock's wedding. I don't know. Have you ever read that one? Because I haven't gotten to it yet.
I haven't. There are so many that I haven't gotten to. It's just, there are so many. Like, I read so many Next Generation books in the 90s, and I still couldn't keep up in the 90s. Do you have any idea how hard it is to catch up now?
Yeah, no, I do. I really do.
Yes, I do know that you know.
I like David's comment here. Would you mention Sybok?
No. Which makes me wonder, are there other kids that Sarek hasn't mentioned?
I wonder. I mean, you're not going to assume, like, if we really want to get scientific about everything, you're not going to assume that every instance is going to result in an offspring, but, every 7 years.
Well, here's the thing. We don't know how old Sarek was when he married Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if she was his first wife.
Actually, if you accept Star Trek V, supposedly she's not. And Sarek was married to a Vulcan princess, whatever a Vulcan princess is. Seriously, okay. Sidebar here. Script writers of Star Trek V.
Was that a script? Was there a script? Because it didn't feel like a story to me. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, apologies to Star Trek V lovers out there, but there's a lot of issues. But supposedly he was married to a Vulcan princess, and that union resulted in Sybok. So, yeah, there's at least one, depending on how you consider Star Trek V canon, marriage before Amanda.
Interesting. There could be more kids out there. We don't know. We
Never
don't know.
Patrick makes a really good point. We know Vulcans aren't exactly forthcoming when it comes to personal stuff. Yeah, they're pretty tight-lipped. So
yeah, well, if you just take Spock, it's like, okay, Spock doesn't tell anyone about Sarek being his father till he absolutely has to. Doesn't tell anyone he's betrothed to Pring until he absolutely has to. Doesn't tell anyone he has a half brother until he absolutely has to. Doesn't tell anyone he has a foster sister until he basically Spock not telling people about his family is the most canon thing ever.
Yeah, so absolutely.
It's a Vulcan thing.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's talk about Bandy or Bendai or Bendy syndrome or whatever we're calling it.
Crash Bandicoot? What? I'm
something
sorry.
like that. Yeah. Um, so basically, it causes a Vulcan to lose emotional control. And I love the way this episode puts it because some episodes don't get this right. But
Mm.
Sarek outright says Vulcan emotions are incredibly intense, or something along those lines. And
Yes.
because you lose control, those emotions come to the surface. So many times when people talk about Spock, they say his human half makes him emotional. No, 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 no,
Mm-mm.
no, no. His human half lowers his ability to control emotions, which are the intense ones, are the Vulcan emotions. So I
Absolutely.
love that this one gets it right.
Yes.
Sorry,
I've
I
been
just want
saying this
to.
for years. This is so true.
Oh,
Brandi
there's a whole
syndrome,
bunch.
an excess of emotions and being unable to control them. Yes, it's now Brandi syndrome.
Brandi syndrome, Bambi syndrome, Bendy syndrome. There's some good ones. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so I like that it's, yeah, the Vulcan emotions that are the intense ones. And there's another line that Sarek has that really leapt out to me this time, more so than watching this before. And it's when he says, oh, I had it written down, and of course my notes are upstairs because we're
Of
the
course.
Unready room.
Yep. That's how we
He
roll.
says, yeah, exactly. He says something like, I'm not wanting to admit that I have an issue to myself, and those around me are willing to hide the fact from me as well, or something like that. And I
Yeah.
really appreciated that because that felt very familiar, where
Mm-hmm.
you have someone who's undergoing a condition or something like that, and we love nothing more, and I'm guilty of this myself, of ignoring it, of like, that's not happening, that's not an issue right now. And when the people around you are willing to indulge you in that as well, and for their own purposes, or for your thinking they're doing it in your best interests as well, are willing to just kind of ignore it and pretend it's not a thing, that's a problem. And that really does happen here for sure. And that really leapt out to me as like, wow, somebody was really thinking when they wrote this script, because that felt so real to me.
I feel like so that somebody who had involvement in this had a relative that had
Mhm.
Alzheimer's and had been
Absolutely.
through a situation like this, and so really, really got it right, because it
Hmm.
really, really captures that feeling, not only for the people around the person going through it, but the person who's going through it and not understanding that this is what's happening to them,
Yeah.
because they've been carefully insulated against knowing that this is happening to them.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think like there's definitely a balancing act between wanting to make life good and comfortable for someone and not letting them worry, but also acknowledging the reality of a situation, and if you're in, especially if you're in a position to be able to do something about it, or something like that. My mom said something to me really interesting. My grandma is getting a lot older, and there's times where she forgets things and kind of forgets where she is in her life, and kind of is in her past basically a little bit. And my mom was telling me this, that those moments when she's kind of surprised by something in her life, that like, oh, I thought, they don't they don't kind of like really get twisted up about it and really sad about it. My mom kind of brings her up to speed, and they kind of laugh about things, and like, oh, I forgot this. It's not severe or anything like that. She's not going through anything very severe. It's pretty mild, but at the same time, my mom's kind of enjoying reminiscing with her and catching her up sometimes on some things, because she's still very much present. She's not
Mm.
gone or anything like that. So I like that, and I hope that can continue, like that level of it can continue for a long time, because um, just as a funny side note, and I hope everybody involved is okay with me telling this story, but my mom's had to tell my grandma a few times to remind her that I was recently married and that sort of thing, or a little while ago that I was dating someone, and my grandma, who's Métis, she's Native American, would ask my mom, "Oh, is she an Indian girl?" And my mom would be like, "Well, yes, but not the way you think, because Nikki is East Indian." So it's always kind of
You
funny.
mean from actual India?
From actual India, yeah.
Yeah.
So the language there is a little funny, because my grandma's, "Oh, she an Indian girl?" Yes, but let me explain. So it's kind of funny. I like that story. That was a total aside, but that really makes me laugh. So yeah, dementia, and so that really rang true for me in this episode. That really hit home.
Yeah.
Thankfully my parents aren't at that level yet. We don't have that going on, but it's something it's very terrifying. It's something in the back of my mind that's always a little scary, for sure.
Yeah, I have moments like that where I'm just like, what there's a name I can't remember, or something like that. And the thing is, those kind of things are normal. We all go through that. But as I get older, that gets slightly scarier. And it happens to my mom. Mom, I know you're freaking out and you're thinking that you have dementia every time that happens, but you do not have dementia, Mom. You do not have dementia. You're fine. You just forget things sometimes, like we all do. You're fine.
Yeah,
Just
that's a little
to
scary to me.
Everyone.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
It's a little scary to me when it happens like 5 times in a day or something. I'm like, okay,
oh, sure.
what is but
maybe you need sleep or caffeine or, a distraction, or I don't know, but it isn't. Yeah. We all do it. It's just part of our lives are so full of things that it is not uncommon for our brain to get a little crowded.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's one day I forgot Tom Cruise's name for like an hour, and I'm like, the actor.
I forgot David Warner's name yesterday, and it really bothered me because I love David Warner, and it's just I couldn't remember his name, and it just really, really bothered me because Dave and I were talking after we had watched this episode, and I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, and something to the effect of, and I said, no, that happens in this episode. That was in he was talking about Jellicoe, and I said no, because Jellicoe made Counselor Troy wear a uniform, because I was like, does her dress have to be cut that low in the front? It's just why, and why isn't she in a uniform? I mean, she is an officer on the bridge, and I never understood why she wasn't in a uniform. First episode she was in a uniform, then never again until Jellicoe came on board. And then I said, and that was the one when Picard was captured by why can't I remember his name? He was Tron. No, he was in Tron. He was Sark in Tron, and he was also a human in Star Trek V, but we don't talk about that. He was Chancellor Gorkon, and Dave's just staring at me because he doesn't remember the name. He doesn't. And I'm like, come on, Brandi, come on. And I'm just like, give up. And then 5 seconds later, like, David Warner.
I hate that. It's so frustrating, especially when it's something like that is like it's in your wheelhouse, right? And it's like, why is this just gone? Yeah, it's my biggest fear is that will happen to me during a like Star Trek trivia contest or something, because that's like my thing. Like I remember minutia of like anything on screen. Like I'm pretty confident, but like I'm worried someday I'll forget, like, I don't know, Barclay's name or something. It'll be something so simple. And I'll just be like, oh my God, I'm a fraud.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It does happen to me at the worst times, because it's like, I know this, and people are looking at me like, you don't know this. I'm like, I really do know this. You don't know this. So it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's see. Okay. We've touched on it briefly, but Patrick Stewart's performance in this. So they do the mind meld in order to kind of give Sarek some control, but of course Picard is taking on the weakened condition. That whole scene, somebody said something about an actor the other day, and I can't remember, it was on a podcast, I forget who they were talking about, but they said like the most ridiculous things, the most outlandish, crazy, wild things you can completely buy from an actor who is completely 100% committed to portraying that. And that's not to say this is wacky or crazy, but losing your emotional control due to a mind meld with an alien, like that's pretty beyond any of our experiences. Patrick Stewart just sells that, and I am right there because he is 100% committed. He is that character, and just is. I can't believe how much he commits to that performance in that moment. It blows my mind every time I watched it. And this last time, I was just as blown away as I was the first time I saw it.
Agree. I get emotional when I talk about this scene because it wrecks me every single time, because I can identify with what he's going through. And the thing is that I'm watching this and I'm realizing this is one take. And he is just doing this. And the camera's like really close. And he's just magic. He's just magic. He is so convincing. He is so real that he's just ripping our hearts out. And there are not many people who could have done what he did in the context in which he was doing it. And even Mark Leonard said, he was great to work with. What he did was brilliant. He was just so natural, and he made it look simple.
Yeah. And those tears at the end were 100% real. Like
obviously.
There's no way that, like, it was so well done. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I don't know what else to say about that scene, just because.
What else can you say? What else can you say? And just, how it's like he's Sarek, trying to keep all of this stuff in, and yet he can't. And so everything is being forced out of him against his control. And just, that is having to do all of these things at once. It was just so good. It was just so good and so heartbreaking. Yeah. Because you're heartbroken for Picard for having to go through this, and you're heartbroken for Sarek because he's going through this all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And, I want to sing Mark Leonard's praises as well. His performance, like, the man just embodies Sarek. And there have been 2 other actors who have stepped into the role since then, and both of them performed admirably, I thought. But Mark Leonard is that character, and he just captures something that, like, there's no one scene with that character through his entire history of playing him that I thought, like, that scene could have been a little better. Like, he's just, I don't know what it is, but he just is that character. And that scene where Picard is confronting him, and Sarek says, I'm a logical being, present your argument. And it starts out this very much like you're in a, just a scientific debate. He says, oh, so your hypothesis is this. Okay, well, this is why that's inaccurate. But his argument's not that logical. And you see the cracks in it start to form until he breaks down at the end of that scene. And it's so well done. And Picard is, poised the whole time and never raises his voice. And Sarek just amps it up. And you buy it, even though all you've ever seen from this character up to this point is that Vulcan, calm. You still buy him in this situation. He just sells it so well. So yeah, nothing but good things to say about both of these actors for sure.
Agree. Well, the most emotion we'd ever seen from him really was Star Trek 3, Search for Spock.
Mhm.
Basically the end of that film when they're going to Mount Seleia to rejoin Spock's body and mind, and they ask Sarek if he wants this to be done. And he says, "My logic is uncertain when it comes to my son," something to
Yeah.
that effect. That's the
Yeah.
most emotion we've ever seen from him up to this point.
Nah.
So
I'm
it's
gonna
just,
yeah. That's one movie that, like, I've watched so many times, it's just, like, imprinted. So his delivery of that, "Forgive me, Talar. My logic is uncertain, or my son is concerned." His delivery of that, I love that. He's so good. Oh, man. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes. And he's not even really displaying emotion, and yet he is. It's like a brilliant delivery of a line. And that's
Mhm.
why he was just so genius at this role. He was
Yeah.
like the embodiment of a full-blooded Vulcan. Because,
Yeah.
of course we had Spock. We have Spock and we love Spock. Spock is half human. So I'm not saying, I'm not casting aspersions upon Spock. He's my favorite. But Sarek is full blood Vulcan, and so now he's like the template by which all Vulcans would like to be made.
Mhm. I love that you said that because I want to talk just very briefly about Sakath, who
Oh yes.
on the list of Vulcans who have graced our screen in Star Trek, not one that I would put on the list of the best. That,
Mm,
and not to, these are tough acts to follow, but I was kind of like, I don't know, I don't really like this. I don't just, but the one scene I will say that I was like, I like the way he played that. That was interesting. Was when Data confronts him, and Data
mm-hmm.
confronts him with logic, and he has to admit at the end, he's like, the mission may be in jeopardy. I was like, I kind of like that performance. Like,
Yeah.
then in retrospect, I'm like, he's kind of barely holding it together. He's scared to death as a Vulcan. Like, he's as scared as a Vulcan can be because he has this legend that he has to work with, and he's holding
Mm-hmm.
it together with his limited skills. And he's like, yeah, we may all be in danger. This may go to hell because of all of this, and I've been helping to cover it up. I was just
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm kind of on board with this guy a little bit now.
Yeah, well, you can really start to see things from his point of view, and what's the word I'm looking for here? Intense pressure that he's
Mhm.
been under, because nobody else on this team can do what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's not really being respected for what he's doing either.
Mhm.
He's doing his best with what he's got, and even Perrin says that Sakath doesn't know anything but what my husband has taught him. And I'm just like, throw shade much? Jeez, this guy's just trying to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I don't blame him at all for, confessing his sins, so to speak, because
Mhm.
logic won out, and
Yeah.
what he did was
Absolutely.
logical. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
Data was absolutely the best person to do that.
That was great. I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, he didn't pull any punches, and he's totally like, um, what's the word? Without guile. Like, he's just
Yes.
Data, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And even the scene before that, where Sakath is kind of obviously like inquiring about Deanna Troy's telepathic skills, and like, how would Picard be able to negotiate? Blah blah blah. And Data's like, hold up. What's
Mhm.
this about? Like, what's going on here? And he's like, bah, nothing at all.
Oh, forgive me. I was just thinking about different permutations and blah blah blah. Yeah, sure you
Mhm.
were. We all knew something was up.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeman Drozen, what's up with this guy? How did he get on the staff? I'm curious. Like,
I don't
I want
know.
to know his story.
I do too. I love that actor though. He was like on
Mhm.
everything in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s. I And it can be a real chameleon. Because even though I recognize him visually, he was always playing such a different character no matter what I saw him in. So I was just like, oh yeah, that guy. And of course, I can't bring the actor's name to my mind, but he was all over the place in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So way to go. But yeah, it's just like he's wearing like this ribbon with Vulcan script on it, and he's very Vulcan-like in his speech patterns and whatnot. What's going on there?
Yeah,
I want to know.
Really interesting.
How long has he been with Sarek? Why is he with Sarek? How did he get that position? How long has he been on Vulcan? Was he raised on Vulcan? Is he part Vulcan? I mean, just like all of these questions I want to know, and I'll never know. I'll never know.
Simon and Schuster, we want that Keyman Drozen novel.
Yeah, and please give us a description of the Lagarans. I've been waiting 30 years for that.
Right? Yeah, they're described at the beginning as the mysterious species or something like that, and we see the mud bath that they're in.
That's
but
150 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And these walls are too bright.
Oh man, great stuff. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
Yeah, there's one thing that really bothered me. This has nothing to do actually with Sarek, but the concert, okay? The least they could have done is get 3 other people who could fake playing a stringed instrument. The guy on the cello was the only one that made me believe he knew how to play a stringed instrument. The second violinist kind of was okay. Brent Spiner, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Every time he went to play, his bow bounced on the strings. It's like, oh my, you guys don't even know how to hold a bow. And I know nothing about playing violin, but I've seen enough people playing violin to know how to hold the bow. It was terrible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it was terrible.
So what I noticed in that scene was, so at this time, they're kind of doing this thing where the junior officers are wearing the season 1 and 2 uniforms and the senior officers are wearing the new ones. And I thought that was like a constant through season 3, except for O'Brien and Wesley when he gets a real uniform, which if I was another ensign or lieutenant somewhere on the ship, I'd be like, the hell does this Wesley kid get a fancy new uniform? But the one of the guys in the concert was wearing a senior officer type uniform. And interestingly, the woman on Data's right had the stripe, but also had like a high collar. And I was like, I've never seen that. I've never noticed that. It's like this weird hybrid between the two. And that's all I was like. I kept waiting for the camera to feature her a little bit better. And she's always kind of small in the frame. And I'm just like, what is going on there? So that was weird. I'd never seen that before.
They borrowed her from another set. Now, Deep Space Nine hasn't started yet, so I don't know what the heck they were doing.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. It was like a halfway thing because she definitely had the higher collar. I kept trying to see if she had the seam down the middle, but I couldn't tell. But then even those high collar ones, some of the background people had the seam down the middle. So I don't know. I used to like draw pictures of all the uniforms and like all the little details when I was a kid. So like, yeah, I'm like, that's a variant I've never seen.
Is it just me, but were the dress uniforms like way longer than they were in later seasons?
Yes. Okay.
It was like they were down to the knees.
Okay, this is interesting because in season 1, they're down to the ankles and they go up like a couple feet every season. It's so weird. So season 3, we're down to the knees. Like later seasons, they'll come up even like a little bit further. Like they just kind of keep bringing that hemline up, which is really interesting. I don't know. Yeah. They just, because originally they're like right almost down to your ankles in I think Lonely Among Us is the first time we see them in the first season.
So weird. I prefer the Love Boat uniforms to that. It's just like, please stop doing that. Also, please be consistent with Beverly's wigs already. Good Lord. She had 2 different wig lengths in one scene.
That's not the last time they'll do that too.
Oh, I know. I know.
My favorite is in the Inner Light when Picard is collapsed on the bridge. They go to commercial. Like Beverly has like straight hair, and then it goes to commercial and comes back, and she has long curls. Like they're so different. She's like, everything's going fine up here. He's in stable condition. I think I'll go see Mott. Get my. I don't know what's going on there.
I'm gonna get a wave. I'll be back. It's just like, guys, and like the length of her bangs changed, and just like, ugh.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Please stop that. Please stop that. Just let her wear one wig per episode. Just one wig. One.
Absolutely. Marge, thank you so much. From She Who Is a Fan of Dan and Brandi. Very sweet of you. Thank you so much. I love the bird in your profile picture.
Oh, yeah. That's very cool.
Thank you so much. There's another comment here. I wanted to... Oh, Rognick. My apologies. Yeah. It was for uniform study purposes, I swear. All right. Yeah. I guess one thing we haven't talked about is like the violence between the
right.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And like I knew it was coming, but it's still shocking to me every time when Beverly wallops Wesley like that, and Wesley is just like, what is happening in this right now? And that was well played by both of them, I think, because I loved Will Wheaton's kind of like, what's going on here? Like, aren't you overreacting?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like they've got the kind of relationship that that she's never hit Wesley. She would never do that. Ever. Parents just don't do that now in that day and age. So, it was, I remembered that she whacked him a good one, but it is still shocking every time. Of course, it starts first with Wesley and Geordi, and it's like later on they have no memory of, they just remember being angry, but they don't really understand why. And then it starts to get more and more violent, like physically violent. My favorite thing about it, though, is Worf saying he hadn't noticed a difference, because Worf's angry all the time, so ain't no different to him. But yeah, I was trying to think of all of the violent situations, and when we went to 10 forward, I'm like, oh yeah, there was a bar fight.
Yeah.
And that was... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please, sorry. I think there's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just going to say that when Picard... when Worf and Riker come into 10 forward, and it's just mayhem, I really paid attention to all the different little parts of the fight, and there was a woman who was really just punching people's lights out in there. She was giving it to all the men. She didn't care.
That's awesome.
And I was just like, you go, honey, you go.
I do love that whole thing started with O'Brien and the fight over the table. Like, that was
the angry Irishman. Yeah, I didn't appreciate that.
Oh, I didn't. Okay, yeah, I didn't think of it in those terms. I just the guy at the table seemed like, and I don't want to like stereotype or anything, but he felt like angry redneck guy to me. I don't know why, but there was something there.
Right. You're right. And then Geordi's the voice of reason.
Yeah,
there are a lot of tables.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say one more thing about Geordi, is the fight between Wesley and Geordi, when Wesley's like, well, at least I don't have to go to the holodeck to get my women. What did you say? Snap! Continuity!
Yeah, that was great. I was actually going to go back to that again too, because that's where I got my name from, because Geordi says you'll get more action out of a good book than you'll get on that date. So yeah, good book. Absolutely. Yeah, that was intense. That went from 0 to 90. Speaking of 0 to 90, the on the bridge between Riker and Picard, when Patrick Stewart yells, you pay attention. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard Riker yell before because he's kind of shouty anyway. But when Picard yells, oh, because you'd never really hear him yelling. And if he's yelling, it's an extreme situation and you better pay attention. So yeah, it was, yeah. The violence and the anger was very jarring.
Yeah, for sure. Good point. Yeah, 0 to warp 4, I should say. Yeah, that was at least warp 8, I'd say.
Yeah. Warp 11. Kidding. I'm kidding. I know that if you hit warp 10, you're actually just everywhere all at once, and then you evolve into an amphibious thing that people end up calling lizard babies, which is technically incorrect.
Yeah, but yeah.
But we're not going to go there.
Talk about that one someday. That would be an interesting choice. Hint, hint to the people in the audience. Speaking of which,
threshold. Sorry.
Man, we've been doing so many like classic episodes lately that like I find it hard to ask to give a rating to it because like they all seem like 5s to me. But I don't know. Any thoughts or final comments and a rating for Sarek from you? And people in the chat?
Yeah, and people in the chat, of course. This is an amazing episode. It's a hard episode because as I've gotten older and more mature, it's even more hard hitting because I've seen the ravages of this happen to people that I know in their families. So it is, I have no real complaints about it. Just the little things that niggle and annoy me that were a product of its time. Like, please hire people who can fake playing stringed instruments and stop changing the wigs every 2 seconds. But yeah, the story was good. Seeing Sarek again was good. Mark Leonard is just amazing. Patrick Stewart was amazing. Everyone was amazing. It's just one of those episodes that may be hard to watch, but it is so worth it every time because you always take something else away from it. So of course it's going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. It's going to be 5 pools of 150 degrees Celsius mud baths out of 5.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say either for myself because it's, as TJ says, one of my favorite Trek episodes ever. Like it's like you say, hard to watch. It's mature subject matter, as they would say, but it's important. It's good. It's so incredibly well acted. 5 out of 5. It's 5 out of 5 people smashing through the glass tabletops in 10 Forward because that's just impressive. It's like, okay, I'm going to throw you right there. And you get the nice shatter, and yeah, that's great. And as Marge says, the episode grows as we age. It feels like a different episode when you watch it at different points in your life, right? You get different things out of it. You see it on a different level. I think that really holds true for this one for sure. Yeah. So I think we've put Sarek to bed. The episode, not anyway. Move past that comment.
It's okay. He requires solitude.
That's true. Absolutely. He's unable to meditate, so I'm just going to go have a nap.
we will leave him now. He requires solitude.
Absolutely. So I think we'll just do this the same way we do before. So the first 3 episodes / films in the comments, and then we'll pick a random one for the 4th one. So from this discussion, like I'm kind of wanting to watch Star Trek III: The Search for Spock again. I'm wanting to watch Threshold of all things.
I'll be honest. I'm one of those weird people that enjoys watching Threshold.
It's been long enough that I might check it out too. I loved it when I was young, and I
Oh,
watched it a
there's
whole bunch of
3.
times. Yeah, we
There's
already
3
have.
already.
Okay, so we
Oh,
have
I'm so glad that I'm
Extinction.
sorry, Paul. I'm glad that we didn't get yours because I hate Unexpected so very much. It's like one of my most hated episodes in all of Trek.
Okay, so we have our 3. So we have Chris Hill nominating Extinction from season 3 of Enterprise. Definitely not my favorite.
Better than Unexpected.
Is it?
Yep. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
All right. Okay, so we have Extinction, Timeless, and Second Chances are the first 3 that I see on my end here. So Extinction, season 3 of Enterprise, they go to this planet that has a virus that kind of mutates them into alien life forms that are seeking the city of Urquat. It's a weird
such
one.
a funny episode. No, it's funny. It can be so funny if you just keep looking at Hoshi like she's some sassy teenage girl.
My God.
Just do that, and it makes the episode 100% better.
So TJ, your comment from Unexpected, the Klingon seeing, I could see my house from here. I'm sorry, that makes the episode for me. I kill myself laughing every time. So I wouldn't be opposed to Unexpected, and I wouldn't mind hearing from Brandi about it, but that's okay.
It's fine. It'll get in there somehow someday, I'm sure.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I will be as gentle as I can. Who knows? Maybe I've mellowed on it. I doubt it, but maybe I have. Maybe someday. But when I do an Enterprise rewatch, I usually skip that one. It just kind of makes me.
For a second one, we have Timeless. Patrick nominates Timeless. That's from the 5th season of Voyager, the 100th episode. That's the one where they use the quantum slipstream drive, and Chakotay and Kim make it back to Federation space in the Delta Flyer, and they lose Voyager, and time shenanigans ensue. And Wellington Smith nominates Second Chances. This is the introduction of Thomas Riker in season 6 of TNG. So nice selection there. I like that they're all from different series. I like when that happens. Mm-hmm. So let's pick a 4th one, I guess. So
okay. So I feel like let's institute a new rule here, that if we have episodes for whatever series we have episodes from that are chosen by the viewers, that we don't take any other episodes randomly from those series.
Okay.
To kind of spread out the love.
You know what's funny is we were talking about there's something in the ether. I thought of that like a couple days ago. I was like, I wonder if we could institute that as a rule, because
let's do that.
I like that.
Yeah, so no TNG, no Voyager, and no Enterprise. So let's see what happens. So if we land on any one of those, so it's 1 through 10, right? Okay. Yep. Hey Siri, give me a random number between 1 and 10. Okay, you're not awake. Wake up, Siri. Give me a random number between 1 and 10.
The answer is 6.
6.
Okay,
that's Enterprise.
Right. Yes. Okay.
So we can't do that. Okay.
No.
Give me a random number between 1 and 10.
It's 6.
Stop it! Hey Siri, give me a random number between 1 and 10.
The answer is 3.
That's Deep Space Nine.
Excellent. Cool. All right. So
1 through 7, I guess. Hey Siri. Come on. Oh, Siri, you're being such a bitch tonight. Excuse my language.
It's all good.
Give me a random number between 1 and 7.
It's 3.
3.
Ooh, okay. And season 3 should have 26 episodes, but I'll double check. 26 episodes.
Give me a random number between 1 and 26. Oh, you're not responding. Let's do it again. Give me a random number between 1 and 26.
It's 9.
9.
Ooh, okay. Defiant. Okay. Oh, interesting. We have both
Ooh.
Thomas Riker episodes on the list. We have Second Chances and Defiant. That is interesting.
Da.
So yeah, Defiant Riker shows up at the station and hijacks the USS Defiant. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. You know what?
That's
When I
cool.
first watched that episode, I'm totally like, that's Thomas Riker. There's no way in hell that Will Riker's doing that.
Nice.
So I was like the only one who was not surprised.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, Extinction from Enterprise, Timeless from Voyager, Second Chances from TNG, Defiant from Deep Space Nine. I love that. That's great. All different series. Mwah. So yeah, I will put up a poll on our at Positively Trek Twitter account. So follow us there if you aren't already, and vote early, vote often. If you have multiple Twitter accounts and really want one to win, go for it. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for following along with the comments. Those of you who are live, thank you to everyone who's watching this later. Really do appreciate it. Brandi, where's the best place to follow you online?
Easiest thing to do is follow me on Twitter at Brandywine12. It's been kind of a ghost town around there lately, I'll be honest, because Dave has been doing mandatory overtime, which means that we're both getting home later and don't have as much free time right now. But it did enable us to have the money to buy a PlayStation 5. So there is that. But yeah, you can just follow me on Twitter, Brandywine12. Brandy's with an I, the 12 is a number. And when something does happen, you'll be the first to know.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join me for this. So thank you so much.
It's the highlight of my fortnight, dude.
Aw, that's awesome. Me too, I have to say, for sure. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Kurtratz, at Positively Trek, like I said, for the poll, and for our podcast, Positively Trek, me and Bruce, we do a weekly show, and some weeks there's 2 episodes because we also have a book club bonus episode every fortnight as well. So yeah. Thank you so much for watching and joining us, and this has been fun. Really great to revisit an older episode I haven't seen in ages, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, and good night.